Hi there everyone, welcome back to another walkthrough series. In this video we're going to be delving into reading passage 3, the history of the tortoise. Pretty much a large turtle. What we have here is, in reading passage 3, we have short answer questions followed by true, false, not given, and then we have some sort of flowchart. And I think that flowchart is the easiest of them all, since they're giving some sort of steps, and yeah. And finally we have some global understanding. What we have to do here is we have to understand the question. And let me just move this a little bit tiny to the upper area. Now, what had to transfer from sea to land? Let me just actually sea to land before animals could migrate. Okay, and then we have two things. We have which two processes are mentioned as those in which animals had to make big changes as they moved onto land. So which animals had to make which two processes? So it's kind of a process that we're trying to understand. Which physical feature? Okay, physical feature possessed by their ancestors do whales lack, meaning they don't have. And finally, which animals might Ichthyosaurs, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Ichthyosaurs have resembled, meaning copied. All right. Okay, and then turtles were among the first group of animals to migrate back to the sea. So turtles were among the first. Among the first. It's a really nice expression here. It is always difficult to determine where an animal lived when its fossilized remains are incomplete. Difficult to determine when its fossilized remains are incomplete. The habitat of Ichthyosaurs, I'm not sure about that pronunciation here, can be determined by the appearance of their fossilized remains. Okay, can be determined by the appearance of their fossilized remains. And now, okay, and I'm just going to skip flowchart here. All right, so if you go back far enough, everything lived in the sea. At various points in the evolutionary history, enterprising individuals within many different animal groups moved out onto the land, sometimes even to the most parched deserts, making their own private seawater with them in blood and cellular fluids. In addition to the reptiles, birds, mammals, and insects which we see all around us, other groups that have succeeded out of water include scorpions, snails, crustaceans, I think, such as woodlice and land crabs, millipedes and centipedes, spiders and various worms. And we mustn't forget the plants, without whose prior invasion of the land none of the other migrations could have happened. So the first paragraph, you see, if you go far back enough, everything lived in the sea. So, at various points in evolutionary history, enterprising individuals, blah blah blah, migrations could happen, stuff like that. Everything that is talking about here is some sort of it is basically that I think, like, moving all these kinds of animals, and maybe if we consider animals like mammals, reptiles, all these predators, they were moving. And finally they're saying that we must not forget the plants, without whose prior invasion of the land none of the other migrations could have happened. So before is something prior, but we know that what had to transfer sea to land before animals could migrate, and that is an answer. And we know that, I'm sorry for that. And I know that we mustn't forget without whose prior invasion, something that is prior before the land, when none of the other migrations could have happened. So the answer for that is plants, and I'm gonna name it as plants and make it as red. All right. Which two processes are mentioned? Those which animals had to make changes as they moved onto the land. All right. Now, moving from water to land involved a major redesign of every aspect of life, including breathing and reproduction. Nevertheless, a good number of thoroughgoing land animals later turned around, abandoned their hard-earned terrestrial retooling, and returned to water again. Really interesting one here. Um, Seals have only gone part way back. They show us what the intermediates might have been like on the way to extreme cases such as whales and dugongs. Whales, including the small whales that we call dolphins, and dugongs, if I'm pronouncing that right, with their close cousins, the manatees, ceased to be land creatures altogether and reverted to the full marine habits of their remote ancestors. They don't even come ashore to breed. They do, however, still breathe air, having never developed anything equivalent to the gills of their earlier marine incarnation. Turtles went back to the sea a very long time ago, and like all vertebrate returnees to the water, they breathe air. However, they are, in one respect, less fully given back to the water than whales or dugongs, for turtles still lay their eggs on beaches. The paragraph 2, the writer indicates that moving from water involved a major redesign of every aspect of life, including breathing and reproduction. So, including breathing and reproduction, it's a major redesign, which animals had to make big changes. Big changes is a major redesign, and I think that is the answer is breathing and reproduction. It's pretty simple here. Yeah, it's breathing and reproduction. Just wanna maybe remove this. There we go. All right, so which physical feature possessed by the dinosaurs do whales lack? There is evidence that all modern turtles are descended from a terrestrial ancestor which lived before most of the dinosaurs. There are two key fossils called Progonachilles kunstedi and Paleocercis talampayensis, something like that. It's really hard to pronounce. Honestly, some sort of Latin names. Okay, dating from early dinosaur times, which appear to be close to the ancestry of all modern turtles and tortoises. You might wonder how we can tell whether fossil animals lived on land or in water, especially if only fragments are found. If only a slight portion can be found, they're saying. It's really interesting here. But however, including small whales we call dolphins, but I remember which physical feature possessed by their ancestors do whales lack. Whales, including blah blah blah, and dugongs, which are their close cousins in manatees, seized by land creatures, altogether and reverted to their remote ancestor. They don't even come ashore to breed. Okay. They do, however, still breathe air, having never developed anything equivalent to the gills of their early marine incarnation. Okay, they do, however, still breathe air, having never developed anything equivalent to the gills of their earlier marine incarnation. This is a really good way of hiding the answer, and I think that the answer for that is never developed is a lack, and ancestors are early marine incarnation, and the answer for that is going to be gills. And we want to highlight that as well. Which animals might Ichthyosaurs have resembled? Okay. And therefore, Ichthyosaurs were reptilian contemporaries of the dinosaurs, with fins and streamlined bodies, with fossils like dolphins, and they surely lived like dolphins in the water. With turtles, it is a little less obvious. One way to tell is by measuring the bones of their forelimbs. So, were reptilian contemporaries of the dinosaurs with fins, streamlined bodies. If the fossils look like resembled, look like dolphins. And the answer is pretty simple as well. Dolphins. Alright, so now turtles were among the first group of animals to migrate back to the sea. Nevertheless, a good number of thoroughgoing land animals later turned around, abandoned their hard-earned terrestrial retooling, and returned to the water again. The question is, turtles were among the first group? Whether turtles were among the first group to migrate back to the sea is not kind of mentioned. Turtles went back to the sea a very long time ago, maybe. Okay, so like they abandoned their herd, but among the first, we don't know whether or not they're among the first group, and I think that's not given. Um, it is always difficult to determine where an animal lived when its fossilized remains are incomplete, and I think that is easy. Well, that is easy one because I remember only fragments are found. We found it. You might wonder how we can tell whether fossil animals living on land or in water, especially if only fragments are found. Sometimes it's obvious. One way to tell is by measuring the bones of their limbs. So incomplete is so like the word fossilized remains are incomplete. Remains or incomplete means fragments, but it is saying that it's but then it's saying sometimes it's obvious. They're saying they were reptilian contemporaries of the dinosaurs with fins and streamlined bodies. So I think the answer is going to be false here. There we go. The habit of Ichthyosaurs can be determined by the appearance of their fossilized remains, and I think that's pretty much true. Most of the times we just there should be at least one true, right? Maybe like analytically speaking. We remember that Ichthyosaurs were reptilian contemporaries of the dinosaurs. So one more time, the habitat of can be determined by the appearance of the fossilized remains. Look like dolphins, and they surely lived like dolphins in the water. With turtles, it's little less obvious. Okay. So they surely lived like dolphins in the water. So it's true that the habitat of that Ichthyosaurs can be determined by the appearance of the fossilized remains, because they partially look like dolphins, reptilian contemporaries. So that is true for us. And are we left with anything else? We are indeed left with a few more chunks of paragraphs. Now, no more than 2 words and or a number. We need that now. I'm gonna take let me just highlight that in yellow. Alright, so step 1, we have step 1. 71 species of living turtles and tortoises were examined, and the total of something were taken from the bones of their forelimbs. I remember that was in okay. Okay, we haven't found anything. Walter and Joyce Jackies gathered at Yale University obtained three measurements in these particular bone tests. One of 71 species of living turtles and tortoises. They used a kind of triangular graph paper to plot the three measurements against one another. So a total of three measurements. Obtained three measurements in the particular bones. And I think that is the answer for us here. Three measurements. The data was recorded on something. Right. The data necessary for comparing the information. Okay. An outcome. We have an outcome. The land turtles were represented by a dense something of points towards the top. Sea turtles were grouped together in the bottom part. So we know that they used a kind of a triangular graph paper to plot the three measurements against one another. All the land tortoises species formed a tight cluster of points in the upper part of the triangle. The data was recorded on a triangular graph. Okay, so let me just highlight that. Triangular graph. I want to take that, and land tortoises were represented by a dense. Dense is like tight. All the land of tortoise species formed a tight cluster of points in the upper part toward the top. So yeah, I think it's cluster. Sea turtles were grouped together in the bottom part. Okay. The same data was recorded from some living something species and added to the other results. Same data was recorded from some living. So I'm going to highlight that. Okay. Cluster in the lower part of the triangular graph. There was an overlap. Alright, so all this something, blah blah blah. There was an overlap, except when they added some species, they spent time both in water and on land. Sure enough, these amphibious species show up on triangular graph approximately halfway between the wet cluster of sea turtles and the dry cluster of land tortoises. We need some that the points of these species turned out to be positioned about something up the triangle between land tortoises and sea turtles. Okay. All right. We have something. There was no overlap except when they added some species. They added some species is like added to other results. Sure enough, these amphibious species show up on triangular graph approximately halfway between the wet cluster and of sea turtles and dry cluster of land tortoises. I think that is actually, we haven't highlighted that as well. And I think, what is the answer here? Is that some living tortoises, I guess? Is it? Let's see. So same data was recorded from some living species and added to the other results. So I think, what is the answer here? Pretty hard to guess here. Is I think that is the answer for this is going to be probably what? Outcome. I lost one information, that's why I'm kind of stuck here. The points of these species turned out to be positioned about. Is it positioned about? So, sure enough, these amphibious species show up on the triangular graph approximately halfway between the wet cluster. So, positioned about halfway up the triangle. I think, okay, this one is halfway. All right, I just found that halfway. But we're still left with the answer here. 39 is, what does 39 say? Bones of something something kind of names were examined in a similar way and the results added. Outcome, the position of the points indicated both these ancient creatures were verb. Okay, were what? Continuously since the time of peak. Right, so we need that. What happened to them? The bones of. Okay. Alright, we're stuck here again. The bones of something leave us in no doubt. So, the position of the points indicated that both these ancient creatures were what? Their points on the graph are right in the thick of the dry cluster. Both these fossils were dry land tortoises. Ah, okay. Dry land tortoises. Dry land tortoises. Alright. But we're still left with numbers. Same data was recorded from some living. I lost the information here. I think it's somewhere around here. Let me just read that one more time from the top. So. Pretty hard. Is it pretty hard? No, it's not hard, I guess. It's not that really hard. Something I missed here. Something I'm not sure. Was recorded from some living. I kind of lost it. Okay. What is it saying here? Oh, so there was no overlap. Sure enough, these amphibious species show up on triangular graph. Ah, okay, go ahead. Added to the other results. Okay, that is an amphibious, and there we go. We found the word. Let me actually copy that word here. It's amphibious. That's what I lost. Sometimes when you just don't examine, not really examine, but monitor your reading, you tend to lose. Especially happens that to me, but it's okay. According to the writer, the most significant things about tortoises is that they're able to adapt to life in extremely dry environments. Is it? Alright, let me just read it loud. Tortoises therefore represent a remarkable double return. In common with all mammals, reptiles, and birds, their remote ancestors were marine fish, and before that, various more or less worm-like creatures stretching back, still in the sea, to the primeval bacteria. Later ancestors lived on land and stayed there for a very large number of generations. Okay. So in common with all mammals and reptiles and birds, their remote ancestors were marine fish, and before that, various more or less worm-like creatures stretching back still in the sea to the river. Later ancestors lived on land and stayed there for a very large number of generations. Later ancestors still evolved back into the water and became sea turtles, and finally they returned yet again to the land as tortoises, some of which now lived in the driest of deserts. So they're able to adapt to life in extremely dry environments. It's not talking anything about this. We're gonna eliminate that. And their original life form was a kind of primeval bacteria. What was that? The remote ancestors, no. The original life form was kind of primeval bacteria. It was to the more or less worm-like creatures stretching back still in the sea to the primeval bacteria. Yes, partially, but not really. And they have so much in common with sea turtles. But I like the option D, since they have made the transition from sea to land more than once. I like this option because I'm going to choose the option D because what is it saying here is that later ancestors on land stayed there for a very large number of generations, and then still evolved back into the water and became sea turtles. Finally, they returned yet again. So what is it trying to say here in the final passage here is that they migrated from one place to another more than once, obviously, and I think that was not that really hard to guess, but let me just recheck that by reading the first. If you go back far enough, everything lived in the sea at various points in evolutionary history. Enterprising individuals with many different animals groups moved out onto the land, sometimes even the most parched deserts, taking their own private seawater with them in blood and cellular fluids. In addition to the reptiles, birds, mammals, and insects which we see all around us, other groups that have succeeded out of water include scorpions, snails, crustaceans, or such as woodlice and land crabs, millipedes and centipedes, spiders, and various worms. Okay, and finally, pretty much what is trying to say in the passage that we read through. You might think, therefore, that modern land tortoises have probably stayed on land ever since those early terrestrial times, as most mammals did after a few of them went back to the sea. But apparently not. If you draw out the family tree of all modern turtles and tortoises, nearly all branches are aquatic. Today's land tortoises constitute a single branch deeply nested among branches consistent of aquatic turtles. This suggests that modern land tortoises have not stayed on land continuously since the time of these two weird names. Rather, their ancestors were among those who went back to the water, and they then re-emerged back onto the land. So yeah, then re-emerged back to the land in relatively more recent times. So yeah, option D is the most correct. Option D is the most correct one and the most suitable one, other than in comparison to these three options here. So there you go, guys. We finished all the passages. I mean, we pretty much finished test number 1. And if you have if you pretty much feel that if you haven't understood any particular question here, you may leave a question in the comment section below. Obviously, if you liked it, please smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if the video was helpful. Of course, you can also smash that dislike button if you didn't like it. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, guys. You have a wonderful time.